long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series and beyond. I am your host, Constant Reader Scott Daly, and I'm joined, as always, by King Newbie Matt Freeman. Matt, confess.
I actually really liked the Dreamcatcher movie.
Ooh. Folks, can he be forgiven? Not by us. Not by us. We turn to a higher power in this regard. The Stephen King.
Also no.
Yes, also no. This week on the show, the Talisman continues as we begin our time in the Sunlight home. It has sun in its name, Matt. How could it be bad? It's got to be good, right? Right?
Yeah. There would never be some kind of subversion in play.
Matt, what did you think of this week's reading?
I mean, delightfully horrible. Just real unpleasant, you know. I mean, the book really excels at getting you to care about our character's plight and then just really piling on.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a very interesting structure, and this is not the first time we've pointed this out, but now it has gone from like, oh, that's kind of interesting to like, okay, this is absolutely what we're doing, is we're moving from like imprisonment to imprisonment.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just absolutely torturing this kid at each, you know, station of the cross. I mean,
that's what popped into my head, and I was like, is that where he's going with this?
That's where I'm going. You know, and it's interesting because as we begin to see in this chapter, in these chapters, he seems to be like gaining in power and strength. Is it because of the trials that he's been through? Is it because of his exposure to the territories? Who knows? Perhaps we'll find out some other week.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that a lot. I think you're right. I think it's funny. We talked last week. It was like, oh, we're finishing part 2, The Road of Trials. So I guess the trials are over. And then bam, arguably the biggest one yet.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. This is one of those big moments. I think the Sunlight home, as you can see, is a place we're going to be a while. We were there for 5 chapters this week. And we leave this week's reading, you know, not like on the verge of escape, like they're talking about it, but it seems like they've got quite a bit of work to do before they get out of there. So we're going to be there a while, and it's bad. It's very, very bad.
It is. It's bad for Jack. It's worse for Wolf. We feel bad for our characters. We even feel bad for Ferd.
Ferd.
I fell in love with Ferd. I'm really sad about Ferd. I hope that Ferd is okay. Like, I know he's not okay, but like
probably fine.
But like, I'll tell you this. I'll be mad if we never find out what happened to Ferd, or if we just never hear about Ferd again. I'll be mad.
I think that would be fair. I think that'd be fair. We'll call him up and let him know how angry you are.
Okay.
And he'll probably say, "Oh, that was Pete. That wasn't me."
Yeah, he would say that.
Speaking of Stephen King, before we move on to the chapter, we just wanted to talk briefly about Stephen King's interview last week on the Kingcast. We got a bunch of emails from you folks letting us know that Stephen King appeared on a podcast, which is very exciting news. And a lot of you said, well, that means he might be on yours in the future, right? And to me, that meant, there's Stephen King is not doing more than one podcast. So to me, it meant that window is closed forever. Not that it was ever really open, but I listened to the episode. I don't know if you listened to the episode on the Kingcast, Matt. Did you?
I don't listen to the Kingcast specifically because it's like exactly kryptonite in terms of what we're trying to do here, where I like people are talking about things that I don't want to be spoiled on, sure. Constantly. And so I do want to listen to that. So if you tell me that it is Matt safe, then I will listen to that episode.
They spoiled the book Revival pretty heavily. Okay. So if you have any intonation of wanting to read Revival, I would not listen quite yet.
Okay.
It was a really good talk. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I think both of those guys, they do a great job every week, but I think they especially did a great job taking on the seemingly insurmountable task of like chatting casually with the guy whose name is on your show, which is so weird. They even acknowledge how weird it is. Like, because I mean, King said that he listens to Losers Club, which is something we knew, and he occasionally listens to the Kingcast, and they're like, is it weird to listen to people talk about you every week for like 2 hours? And he's like, yeah. It's weird. I think one of the, there's a lot of fascinating things to be gleaned from that interview. One of the things is that I'm not sure how much, like, I don't think I want Stephen King listening to our show. I just don't think it would be very interesting to him. One of the things he said is, like, when it gets down to like analysis or understanding how the books work or what they're doing, the exact thing we do, he doesn't need to listen to people talk about that because he wrote the book. So like he knows all that stuff already. So I mean, what he would definitely do, without a shadow of a doubt, he would call us stupid nerds, tell us to get a life, which is exactly what he did when Scott asked him a nerdy question. So
I love him.
He's great. I mean, like, that's the thing. Like, I've listened to plenty of interviews with him before, and this was no exception, that he just seems like this very chill, laid back guy who just loves what he does to death, loves talking about it. I think it is really funny because the one big spoiler in Revival was a question they asked him that I won't spoil for you or anyone else here, which is like, why did you pick this certain thing? And his response is, I don't know, man. That's just what I saw. And like, that's a really great answer. And I think it's partially true, but I think it's only partially true. Like, I think King loves being super casual with, I don't know, man. I just think of the stuff, but like, he's smart and he's doing stuff too.
Yeah. Everything's bouncing around in a prism of themes where, whatever that element is, it fits in with all these other things. And maybe it's possible that he's doing all sorts of stuff unconsciously, right?
Sure.
But I think that he also recognizes what he's doing. He has to be, okay? Yeah. He has to be.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a great interview, though. If you have not listened to that episode of the Kingcast or that show in general, of course, we heartily recommend them. We are good friends with them. Scott Wampler has appeared on our show before, and hopefully we'll get them back at some point. They're kind of busy having Stephen King on their show right now, so they haven't had a lot of spare time. But we love those guys. Very happy for them, and it was truly a great interview. That once you read Revival, Matt, I would strongly encourage you to check that interview out.
Yeah, I would like to read that one.
I guess the news from it, as far as the Dark Tower is concerned, is he kind of, like, they asked him, "Are you done with the Dark Tower?" And his response was very. He basically said, "I'm never done with the Dark Tower," but he said that in the way that, like, to him, the Dark Tower connects everything as it literally does, and so anytime he's writing, it's in some way connected to the tower. So. It's a very non-committal like, is he going to write the Flag book or is he going to write another Dark Tower book? He didn't seem to say yes, but I
mean, what I take from that is, like, he has no immediate plans to do that, but I it seems to me that the tower bug strikes him every few years, and there's no reason to think that it would not,
Yeah.
So.
I think the other thing, sorry, I'm thinking of more things as I'm trying to wrap this section up. I'm thinking of more things he said. The other thing that I thought was fascinating is he's talking about, they blank asked him, like, do you think about dying a lot? Do you think about death a lot? And he's like, no, once you get to my age, it just becomes kind of your constant companion. So where you just really don't think about it anymore. And I think that's really interesting because I think in some of the books we've covered on the show, it was very clear to me that at that time in his life, he was thinking about these things. He was very conscious of these things. It's hard to read the book Insomnia and not think this is a man who's thinking about death and who's thinking about dying and is possibly going through a kind of midlife crisis. And of course, I think it is generally true that fades as you go, right? The older you get, basically what he's saying is it becomes more of a constant refrain in your life, so you stop thinking about it quite as much. But it makes me wonder, like, the question we had coming out of Insomnia would be like, what do you think of Ralph Roberts now that you are the same age as he was, when you wrote this character? What is your opinion on what being old is like now that you are old? What is your opinion on your death now that you have reached the age that this character is? It made me want to ask those questions even more, actually, because he obviously has had a change in perspective on these things. You can tell by the way he answered those questions.
Yeah, sure. That sounds like a great question, and I would be curious to hear as well.
Yeah. One day, Stephen, we're coming for you.
We're coming for you.
we vaguely know the hosts of podcasts that had you on, which is technically an in. I mean, it technically is an in.
1 degree of separation.
Yeah, we're closer to King than Kevin Bacon, right?
We've podcasted with people who have podcasted with Stephen King.
There you go.
That's
there
something.
You go.
That's something.
That is indeed something. All right. So I think one more thing. Y'all should follow us on Twitter. I'm trying to get our tweets up.
Yeah.
So follow us on Twitter if you haven't already. It's at kingslingerspod. We post clips from the episodes and other fun stuff and news and updates about the show. So if you want to make sure you're always in the know about what's happening here at Kingslingers and, at Doof Media at large, make sure you follow us on Twitter.
Yeah. And if you don't have a Twitter, then don't get it.
Yeah. In fact, teach me your ways, please.
Yeah.
Because I think it might just be too late for us, actually.
For those of you who are already damned like us, though, please follow us.
Yes, there you go. There you go. All right, Matt, let's go ahead and get into this week's reading. Let's talk about Chapter 20, Taken by the Law. We begin this week's reading with a whole new month. The lunar calendar is reset. Jack is recovering from his illness. Wolf, with a stomach full of man's best friend. Their two are ready to start heading west without anything else delaying their journey. Nothing else bad is going to happen.
Nope.
From here on out.
Smooth sailing across that Aegean Sea.
First, they head to a Burger King where Jack takes a shower in the bathroom. Gross. Mm-hmm. And then scarfs down some burgers, some Whoppers, because it's a branded Burger King, because it's Stephen King. He realizes that Wolf has attracted a crowd of children who have decided that Wolf is probably the Hulk or something, which is really fun because, again, this was 1984, right? This is just kids knowing the Hulk from comic books and not this giant mega conglomerate that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
No, just the comics, yeah. It's funny because at this point I picture Wolf as looking like Tiger, the big giant orange cat in the Fievel movies, which is funny because he's a cat and Wolf is a wolf, but that's just how I picture Wolf. I'm sorry.
That's weird. I don't understand why that is.
I don't either, because that's not how he's described.
No.
At all. But sometimes your brain does stuff and you just let it go.
I mean, my thing is I keep picturing him as Lou Ferrigno from the Hulk miniseries now that he's been compared to the Hulk, because that's just what I see.
That's probably more accurate.
Is it though? I don't know. I know he's tall. I think he was like lanky though, where Lou Ferrigno was just a very big man.
Honestly, it's been so many weeks since we met Wolf in the first place that I just totally forgot how he's described originally. So anyway, that aside, I'm going to continue to picture him as the giant cartoon cat.
You do what you want.
And so I wanted to talk a little bit here and just maybe preface stuff we're going to talk about throughout the week regarding Jack's sort of growth or change. There's a lot here, the taking a bath in the sink bit here, and also his like interaction with the Burger King cashier is really emphasizing this point that I think we saw some of last week, but it's really been revisited heavily this week, where Jack started out this journey basically a rich kid, not the luckiest kid in the world because he did lose his dad, but very physically comfortable kid, very normal. And now he's taking a bath in a Burger King sink, and he's kind of doing it without even really remarking upon it internally, like not thinking about the indignity of it all. It's functional. It's like I'm dirty. I need a quick bath. Gonna clean off a little bit. This is just how life is now. Yeah, and I think this is a great way of showing how his character has changed so much over time.
I like that. I didn't think about that, but you're so right. The casual, everyday nature with which he does this. I don't think it says specifically, but it makes you feel like he's definitely done this before. He's definitely walked into a bathroom, grabbed some napkins out of the dispenser, wetted them down, and washed himself with them.
Yeah.
That is not the ideal way to live your life, but he's used to it. He's road traveled now, which I think you're right is something that we're going to see again and again throughout these chapters specifically.
Yeah, I think so.
So Jack goes to intervene and protect the Hulk Wolf from all these scary little children. And there's this thing we see here as we're looking at these people. Someone else is looking on. We see a tall blue-jeaned man in his 20s open the door of a battered red pickup 5 or 6 feet away down the curb, leaned against the cab, and watched, smiling. And I want to talk about this man for a bit, Matt, because I think this is such a fascinating look at how authors manipulate expectations. Because in this book, we've had people who have both helped and harmed Jack on his journey west, right? And often the people that harm him ends up being the people who, at first at least, offered him help or an opportunity or something. Mm-hmm. And there's no real consistency to which is which. And I think the authors know that. So when we see this guy looking at our two characters and smiling, especially in a scene that I think most other human beings would just look at weird. Wolf is behaving weird here. He eats a cardboard Whopper holder. And this guy just like looking on, and it's just like, oh, this is just great. I love it. I think we're automatically kind of torn between this central idea of, okay, does this guy mean us harm? And is there something more insidious behind this smile? Is he smiling because he's friendly or because he's scheming? And I think this is especially true because King and Straub have already primed us with this fact that we know an arrest is coming, right? Like both with King shadowing in the last chapter, but also the title of this chapter is Taken by the Law, right? So we're kind of already primed to be expecting something bad happen. And then there's just this guy and he's smiling at the weirdness that Wolf has that is making other people uncomfortable. And you're just like, oh boy, what's going on with this guy?
Yeah, I felt the same. In fact, I think my assumption when I first saw him, when the text first describes him rather, was oh no, this guy's gonna try to trick them. He's gonna he's gonna offer them something, but it's gonna be under false pretenses, and this is gonna be bad. And it's not that at all. In fact, quite the opposite. It's a little eucatastrophe. It's a little good a little bit of good fortune that strikes our hard luck heroes, and in fact brings them many miles closer to their journey. The worst you can say for the guy is that he sort of drops them directly into the jaws of the trap that will then slow them up for a while. I don't think he's doing it on purpose. I don't think he drops them there knowing that they're going to get caught by the highway patrol. If there weren't little moments like this, then it would be quite a slog. I don't know though. What is this meant to make us more cognizant of this kind of aura of power that Jack has been putting off?
Possibly. Yeah. I think we learn, no, it's not him that is the guy that Jack later points out as the first person that notices a change in Jack. It's not Bill Thompson, who is the name of this guy. It's someone else. But yeah, I think so. I think there is he has an aura around him that tends to engender kind-hearted people to helping him, and also seems to really piss off bad-hearted people in a lot of ways. I think so. I mean, I do think it's playing a lot with expectations here as I don't know. I think you're right that it seems that there was no ulterior motive here, that Bill Thompson is just a genuinely good guy. But you could, if you wanted to get really conspiratorial with it, that he drops them off on this road and a cop immediately shows up and he's put a joint in Jack's pocket. You could, if you wanted to, be like, oh, this is he's on the payroll and he's just sending people down the be picked up corridor to end up to Sunlight Home. I don't think that's what's happening here. There's nothing really to indicate that's what's happening, but I wouldn't blame anyone if they had that thought flash into their mind as they saw the events of these couple chapters play out.
It's entirely possible is kind of the sad, cynical thing. It's entirely possible. And I almost kind of like that there's some ambiguity there, because,
sure,
the Sunlight Gardener, conspiracy seems to range far and wide. You can imagine that this guy is in fact just dropping people into the net where they're going to get funneled into the whole fiasco. It just doesn't vibe with me. I just don't, it's hard to put my finger on it. I would bet against it, but
sure.
But I totally see the case for it. Yeah.
A little bit of extra textual evidence against here is actually that the character's name is Bill Thompson, and Bill Thompson is the name of the editor at Doubleday, King's first publisher, who is basically responsible for discovering Stephen King. He read the manuscript for Carrie. He immediately recognized it for what it was, a great novel from what will be a huge author, and he basically went to the managers at the publisher and said, we have to publish this guy, we have to do this. He championed it. He took the book and King up as if they were his own and fought to get his book published. So I don't think that King would King had a very long and successful relationship with this man, and I don't think he would write him into his book in a way that is like, and then actually he was evil. So I think that lends towards your general idea that this was just a legitimately good guy who saw two kids who needed help and out of the goodness of his heart helped them.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to imagine, the metaphorical connection of like this guy, the real life Thompson scooped King up off the sidewalk where he was languishing next to a metaphorical Burger King. Yeah, and
offered him a ride.
Yeah,
to success and riches and
Just before we move on from this kind of beat of this guy taking them on a long jaunt and then they're kind of caught again. I was thinking about the Odyssey again and thinking like, okay, well, the Odyssey is also much like we've discussed for this book. It's basically a series of imprisonments and challenges with long stretches of travel in between, which is what this is. And that's in contrast, I think, to something like the Lord of the Rings, where it's not that there's no moments where characters get imprisoned in the Lord of the Rings, but really most of the Lord of the Rings is people making progress one way or the other. They're traveling, they're walking, okay, they'll run into an obstacle, they'll deal with the obstacle. But the Odyssey has this very different motif where it really is like, okay, and then he gets stuck with Cersei for a whole bunch of time, and then he gets stuck on the Cyclops Island for a whole bunch of time, and then he gets so there's very, very, like the longer we go into it, the more confident I am that this is a very Odyssean story.
No, I think you're spot on there. I think a lot of the travel in the Odyssey is kind of yada yada over as well, because it is more about these set pieces and these moments of being trapped or being imprisoned and how our characters escape from that, which is very different from Lord of the Rings. So yeah, no, I agree with that. All right. So the problems begin, as we said, almost immediately after Jack and Wolf get dropped off from Bill Thompson's ride. They're walking along the road and a police officer, or Capice Man, as Wolf calls him. How does it actually say that in the audiobook? I've always just read it as Capice Man.
I think it's like Capice Man, because you just misheard what Jack said, like a kid, basically. So this Capice Man pulls him over after not buying their story, immediately arrests them. Oh, I hate this guy. This guy's the worst. I love the description of him. Yeah. He's awful. And I love the description of like, I didn't pull the quote, but it says something like everything turned on Jack so quickly that he didn't even have time to do anything, like everything's going great. And then the turn to bad is so quick that he can't even follow it. Yeah. That's, it really, it's this whole, it sucks. This whole thing, like he really doesn't have a chance, right? Like from the moment this guy shows up, he doesn't have a chance. There's nothing he could have done or said that would have averted this. They knew what they were going to do with him immediately. Yeah. I love how that is kind of slowly revealed too, that he's getting railroaded here and we don't even know it yet. Like, it's not as if he could have talked his way out of it or he had a chance to escape. Like, this guy knew he was going to arrest these two the second he saw them, basically. Yeah. Right. Wolf is beaten over the head, which turns out is only a preview of exactly how worse this whole experience is going to be for Wolf, which is a refrain that you talked about last week, and I think is continued throughout these chapters as well. And then we get this line here. You've got a few surprises ahead of you, the policeman said. You're going to get a little sunlight in your soul. And I think, Matt, this is where king shadowing is so fun and effective, because we've already heard of the Sunlight Home at this point and have been told how bad it's going to be. So here we have this line, and it's just, it's confusing on the surface, especially for our characters, but it elicits a specific emotional reaction from us, the audience, almost as if there's so this is how that happens. We've heard about the Sunlight Home. Yeah, exactly. We're like, oh no, okay. Like we see what track we're on, but we're like, oh no. But also like I distinctly remember it because the wording was very vivid, because I believe the text previously says, it refers to it as the hell of the Sunlight House or something like that. Yeah. of course, it also seems very Kingian to have a horrible, abusive hellhole be called something as whimsical as the Sunlight House.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
They're brought into the police station and almost immediately taken before the county judge to explain themselves. And speaking of this county, I want to read this description because it is just so delightful to me. The cop pushed them across the anteroom and opened the door to a room twice as large, lined with books on one long wall, framed photographs and diplomas and certificates on the other. Blinds had been lowered across a long windows opposite. A tall, skinny man in a dark suit, a wrinkled white shirt, and a narrow tie of no discernible pattern stood up behind a chipped wooden desk that must have been 6 feet long. The man's face was a relief map of wrinkles, and his hair was so black it must have been dyed. Stale cigarette smoke hung visibly in the air. "Well, what have we got here, Frankie?" His voice was startlingly deep, almost theatrical. I just love everything about this description.
Yeah.
I love the details of the guy and his wrinkly face and his theatrical voice. I love the chipped wooden desk that's sitting there. Like this is a racket, right? This is a racket. This is a judge. This is like the county magistrate, we learn. And he's in the same building as the police office because they're just running kids through here all day, every day.
Yeah, right. It's so gross. It's laden with this sense of doom and dread. I love how rich these one-off characters are, like this judge, this tall, skinny man in a dark suit, wrinkled shirt, super deep voice. Yeah. I mean, this is supposed to be the authority figure. In a different story, this is the savior, right? Like the cop is messing up, and this is the opportunity for Jack to tell his story, and he will be this kind, understanding authority figure that will free them and let them on their way. But that's not what this book is at all. Yep.
So Jack begins telling an adjusted version of his story, and we see right away that the judge isn't buying a bit of it. And we kind of glossed over this, but one thing we need to say here is that Jack had this joint in his pocket when he was arrested, and he ate it while he was in the back of the police car. He like ducked down and shoved the whole thing into his mouth and ate it. And so throughout this whole conversation, Jack is high as fuck. And he's presumably never been high before. You know, he's a 12-year-old boy. I think he probably has not done drugs before. Probably.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of tripping his way through this conversation, and the narration is from Jack's perspective here. And so it's almost if he doesn't fully realize, oh, I'm high right now. Like he's like, the world seems to be slowing down in this weird kind of way. It's because you're high, kiddo.
Yeah. No, I don't think he realizes it because he doesn't know what to expect. I think he thinks this is just because he's in such a bad situation that everything seems dreadful and terrible.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because this is a fairly fun and intense setup, right? We have this, oh no, the joint realization that happens where we see Jack is, about to get arrested. But that gets resolved because he eats it. But then we have this, oh no, he's high, and that will surely fuck up his meeting with the judge. And while he doesn't specifically fuck up his meeting with the judge because of the joint, he's clearly not on his A game either, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the joint just puts him in enough of an altered state where he's, just not functioning. I was actually thinking that it was going to let him jump into the territories, or maybe even, make him feel like he could jump into the territories, but then choose not to. But it seems not to do either of those. Just kind of makes him loopy and dumb. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that we kind of talked about last week how that would be a possibility, and it didn't pan out. I think he's just too much is happening too quickly, and it doesn't even occur to him.
Yeah. The worst part in all of this to me, which and maybe this it's funny, back when this book was written, I feel like the idea that you could just hit somebody on the head and they'd just get knocked out was more kind of normal. Whereas now I'm just like, oh my God, did he just crack Wolf's skull and give him brain damage? Because he just struck him on the head hard enough to knock him out. There's just so everyone realizes, like more likely than not to give somebody brain damage by hitting them on the head hard enough to knock them unconscious. Especially what he said was like struck him on the back of the skull.
Yeah.
where you're just like, okay, that's bad. That's real bad. And then Wolf is like out cold for at least several minutes. Like he should be checked for a concussion. This is just terrible. It made me so sad. I was so mad at that. I just want this cop to get eaten.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't directly confront this, but Wolf is definitely complaining about how much his head hurts for the rest of these next few chapters. And I mean, this is the beginning of not good times for Wolf. And so, yeah, he has a serious head injury that is not going to be treated properly on top of everything else that's about to happen to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, the fascinating part as we come to the close of this chapter to me is, after all is said and done, after all the tension that I think King and Straub do a very good job of wielding here in this, will he or will he not get out of this whole thing? We learn that it was all irrelevant. Joint or no joint, high or no or not, guilty or innocent. Jack and Wolf are being railroaded by a system that exploits young boys, and they're going to the Sunlight home regardless. And we see here at the very end of the chapter, the cop that you hate so much, Matt, says, "You two shitheads just earned me $20 plus another 20 for Judge Fairchild. Ain't it great?" So we see here that this is just literally a system that brings these kids to this place because people can benefit from it financially. Yeah,
presumably the whole justice system of this whole region is just scooping up any unfortunate, young men that they can find for any reason on any cause, and being like, "Oh, you know what? You need some sunlight in your soul." And it's terrifying.
It is indeed. And it's about to get a whole lot more terrifying as we move into chapter 21, titled The Sunlight Home. And here we are, Matt. This is it. As you can already tell by the fact that we're spending the rest of the week's reading here, our characters are going to be here a while. They're not close to escaping. We're spending a lot of time here. And I thought I'd pause here for a sec at the beginning of this chapter, this terrible, terrible chapter, to talk about what is at this point an obvious trend in this book: the exploitation of children, specifically young boys. So much of the events of this book, as you have already kind of touched on, are about the abuse and exploitation of young men. Like again and again and again, we see this, from Smokey Updike to the men propositioning Jack for sex that we talked about last week, to Sunlight Gardner and his Home for Wayward Boys. This is an absolute trend that we're showing here, right? Like this idea of the imprisonment or the abuse or the manipulation or the exploitation of young men is definitely something we're experiencing like across a trend line.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I totally agree. Much of King's work centers on the young. He spends a lot of time with kids, and that's the norm. But this book goes an extra level of kind of depth in focusing on the horribleness, focusing on hammering on these specific systems of, like you said, exploitation, just how the young are treated like they're worthless, and like how being young can be so like literally torturous, not like in a exaggerated use of the word that we always use the word torturous, but like no, like they're like being tortured by all these places they go, because the young the boys in this prison and Jack in general throughout his journey, he has no power. He has no it's funny. I struggled writing the notes for this section, and I also struggled talking about it too, because it's hard to pin down, but it seems really important, because like I remember being a kid and having this strong sense of having no power. And it's true, by the way. It's not like you're wrong. It's like, no, you actually are somewhat less than a second class citizen. Like if you play hooky on a school day, that's you're in big trouble, Sonny. Whereas like when you're an adult, it's like, okay, well, the worst thing that'll happen to you is you'll lose your job if you play hooky from work, but you're not going to get arrested. Like you have no control over your life, and it can be hard, or it can be agonizing. I don't know, like I just love that King focuses on this and makes you really feel it and really remember how bad it was actually, or could have been.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think the really interesting thing to me is that the overall plot of the book is about a young boy kind of traveling across the country to seize some of that power back, right? Like the inciting incident of this book is a child feels powerless because his mother is dying and there's nothing he can do to stop it. And then the world, the magical world of the territories kind of intervenes and says, no, Jack, there actually is something you can do. There, here, you powerless boy that is completely beholden to the world around you. There's actually something you can do. You can go across the world, the country, get this talisman, and it will give you power to do this thing that you want to do. And then along the way, he is constantly being put in situations in which any power he has is completely stripped from him. Like that's Smokey did the same thing. Now the Sunlight Home has done that. Like he is completely powerless in a way even beyond what he was at home. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this is definitely something we're doing and exploring here for sure.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to see it more and more, so there'll be plenty of opportunity to talk about it. But I really like this idea that you just pointed out that he's trying to retake his power. I remember distinctly the first chapter of the book has this pervasive feeling of like malaise and lack of control, and it's like things are just happening to Jack constantly. Yeah, weird hallucinatory things, and he's in this oppressive place, and he's sort of cowed even by just like a glare from an adult, and he's obviously come a long way, but he's still physically, for all he's still trapped. He still has no power because legally within our world, he actually in fact has no power.
Yeah. Like the idea that a kid can be picked up on the side of the road and just be detained. Like one of the most powerful statements, I think, in the last chapter we just talked about is when the cop looks at him and says, all right, look, you're not technically arrested. Okay. So no, I don't want to hear anything about no phone call. You're in limbo. You have no rights right now. We're just detaining you. And it's like, what the fuck? What?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just wild. And I think this is absolutely what we're doing. It's almost as if, the entire universe is pushing back on a kid's attempt to establish some power for himself. Like that is his quest. His quest is to get a power, and the world says, no, you can't do that. And so it is constantly putting him in these situations where even more power is stripped from him.
Yeah. I like that a lot. That's a good framing.
So we meet the Reverend Sunlight Gardener, owner and proprietor of the Sunlight Home, and we're immediately told, Matt, that there is something familiar about him, a look on his face, the excessive amounts of perfume or cologne he's wearing. And then we realize it's the twinner of our good friend Osmond. And you thought, you stupid idiot, we were meant to compare Osmond and Smokey Updike. But no. Here we have his Twitter and good old Sunlight Gardener.
Oh my God. Well, okay, to be fair, I was contrasting him with Smokey Updike, not comparing, but yeah, I mean, I did kind of figure that was who we were supposed to be thinking about because we met them in such short succession.
Yeah, I mean, I'm mostly just giving you a hard time. I led you right to that idea, so like I'm kidding,
but to consider, to think specifically about this pairing of Osmond versus Gardner, and them being similar and them being different, like the question that came to my mind was like, if these are two sides of the same coin, then what is the nature of the coin exactly? Like, what is the Osmond Gardner persona want? Because Osmond seems way more unhinged and physically violent. Gardner seems way more sadistic and psychologically violent. What is it that they fundamentally want? Do they both want control over others? I mean, Gardner has self-control. Osmond doesn't have self-control. These are all questions. I don't know that I even need an answer. I was just thinking about the fact that, you can have these twinners and they've got some kernel that's similar, but then they've got a lot of other stuff that's different.
Yeah. I mean, I think if we kind of use the idea of the territories as being a place where everything is just elevated a little bit, right? The smells are stronger, the air is crisper and cleaner. Like then Osmond is a gardener who is just a little bit more so. And so that takes a person who maybe operates with a little more smoothly and escalates him to a person who is just unable to control his delights, the torture of his delights. Because Gardner is a man who does a lot of really, really terrible things, but he's smart enough to mostly operate through other people, right? Like he has his two boys that we're going to meet here in a second that administer most of his actual punishment that he has and does most of the stuff. And so he can like maintain this removed air, because it's not I'm not beating these children,
right?
My underlings are beating these children, whereas Osmond is the one holding the whip.
Yeah Or, I mean, Gardner could even say like, oh, sometimes the boys get into fights, and
yeah plausible deniability.
I like that idea though. It's consistent with everything else that we've talked about, so I like that.
The interesting thing about this, though, is as soon as Jack recognizes Osmond in Gardner, we see that Gardner recognizes Jack as well, though we see he can't quite pin down exactly from where. He says he has a really good eye for faces and he doesn't never forget a face, but he doesn't know where from this one, which is interesting, right? It makes sense that Jack recognizes him. He's seen both forms of the twinner, but this clearly shows that there is a connection between Osmond and Gardner that goes beyond just their twinners. It seems to be a bit more than that.
Yeah, I immediately started thinking that Gardner must have some more explicit territories connection than the usual sense in which everyone's got a twinner.
Which the book kind of directly confirms as we move later into the chapter,
Right. But then, okay, just to flash forward for a second there, like the question you then ask is like, okay, so if Gardner basically saw Jack in the form of Osmond, then, does he not remember being Osmond that clearly? Or there's all sorts of questions that pile up in the mind. I don't really need an answer to them, but we'll talk about that when we get there.
Yeah, I think this is part and parcel of the confused conversation we had last week about Morgan Sloat versus Morgan of Orris and how exactly those two people operate both together and independently of each other. And we don't have any more clear answer with the existence of Osmond and Gardner here.
Yeah, right.
So we meet Heck Bast and Sonny Singer, the right-hand boys of the Reverend, who suck a lot. How do you feel about these boys?
Well, they're awful bullies in the normal king sense, which is to say that you hate them, but you also can feel a little bit bad for them because you can very easily see that they come from their own shady circumstances.
Yeah.
But mainly, though, you hate them.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely do hate them, but it seems like that's the thing is these bullies always have this greater power behind them that is clearly manipulating them. And so as much as you hate them, you're also like, the Reverend has clearly fucked these two kids up to the point where they're just revisiting this cruelty and pain on everyone else around them. Mm-hmm. And I think the name Heck Bast is just wonderful. All this week, just a bunch of really great names.
Yeah, I think my favorite king name ever is coming up in a minute.
Yeah. So the two check in, these two bullies check in Wolf and Jack, taking all of their items, including Jack's all-important totems, the guitar pick, the coin, and the mirror, right? I think those are the three totems he's gotten. And we don't, the interesting thing about this is we don't have any idea of what these things do. We just know, logic tells us they are important in some way. And so Jack needs them in some way. Otherwise, why would you introduce them into the story? Chekhov's totems here.
Right.
So basically what this means is that Jack is not able to like slip out in the middle of the night or just flip over wherever. Like he's got to get his stuff back first, right?
Yeah. I mean, it seems very important to the completion of the quest that he not lose the stuff.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We also learn here an important fact about the Sunlight Home. 60% of all the boys at the school are here voluntarily, which is a pretty loaded statement, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what does that actually mean in the context of the home? Like, certainly on some level, it means a lot of these kids have been brainwashed. On another level, it means you've been railroaded by the system so hard that, like, you sign a document that says you're here voluntarily, even if you have no ability to actually want that in any kind of way.
Right. And it's like both of those things are so bad. I don't even know which one I would rather be the case.
I know. I do like this as they get up. They leave the bottom floor and get up to the dormitories. We get this. Here, there was no attempt to disguise the real nature of the Sunlight home. A narrow corridor ran the entire length of the top of the house. It might have been 50 feet long. Rows of narrow doors with inset eye-level windows marched down either side of the corridor. To Jack, the so-called dormitory looked like a prison. Because it is.
Yep. It effectively is a prison. And as a massive cynic, I think most of the environments into which we stuff young people are prisons. So there you go.
Like schools?
Like schools.
Taking a bold statement here, Matt.
Yeah. I mean, but like this, the schools that I went to looked like this, though, where they have that, you know, shatter resistant glass with the wire embedded in it that just makes you feel like, and then like the thick heavy door that like with the giant heavy lock on it, and you're like, oh, I'm being detained. I'm literally being detained against my will.
Yeah, I mean, especially as like, you know, school shootings become more prevalent and like security measures at schools escalate, it feels more and more prison-like, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't even know what a high school looks like now. The school I'm talking about was built like before Columbine, so it already looked like a prison, and presumably they're just worse now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think a lot of schools the stereotype is like schools in bad neighborhoods, quote unquote bad neighborhoods, will have metal detectors, right? I think like a lot of them just do now. A lot of high schools, no matter where they're located, what part of town they're located in, just have metal detectors now.
Yeah, it's sort of
and bag check and like all this stuff. It's just wild.
Yeah. But I guess the argument is better safe than sorry.
Sure. It's just weird. It's just weird that like this is a school, and like I understand why we feel so unsafe in school. Like I get it, but it's awful.
Well, the thing that sucks is like it just makes you feel more scared. Like I remember being that age, and the idea that I was going to have to walk through a metal detector, it didn't bother me. And it did bother me, but it didn't bother me because I'm like, oh no, what if I like? No, it's like I'm not going to get in trouble. What scares me is the idea that I live in a place, that I go to a place every day that's so dangerous that my fellow students have to be checked for weapons or they're going to murder me.
Yeah.
That's what made it scary to me as a kid. I'm not making this up. Like I remember being like, oh my God, what a horrifying thought.
Yeah. And I think it all just adds to an environment that feels suffocating in the same way that I think this environment here feels that way.
Yeah, I agree. Suffocating is a good word.
So the two boys are led to their dorm room where they will wait out the rest of the boys' work shift. They get told that they won't start their work until tomorrow. I didn't pull the actual like daily schedule here, but it's like wake up at 5, pray, pre-breakfast work in the fields, work, post-breakfast work, it's insane. It's a work camp, basically. That's what it is.
Yeah. It's literally. Yeah. Absolutely.
I really like this. So Wolf and Jack are talking about Osmond and Gardner, and Wolf says, "The white man." Wolf said, almost too softly for Jack to hear. "White man?" Wolf held up one of the pamphlets, its back cover showing. The whole rear cover was a black and white photograph of Sunlight Gardner, his beautiful hair lifting in the breeze, his arms outstretched, a man of everlasting grace, beloved of God. "Him," Wolf says. "He kills, Jackie, with whips. This is one of his places. No wolf should ever be in one of his places. No Jack Sawyer either. Never. We have to get away from here, Jackie." So, I mean, the reason I pulled this is because obviously I don't think Sunlight Gardner is literally whipping people to death, right? Like Osmond whips people to death. Right. So Wolf sees Sunlight Gardner, and he also sees him as the twinner of Osmond.
Yeah, exactly. He recognizes him, and how he does that exactly, is it wolf magic, or is it just he senses the evil, or he smells it? I don't know, but it doesn't really matter. It totally makes sense to me that Wolf would know that this was the same guy. Another thing that I've been noticing, I don't remember when it started, or maybe I'm just having a glitch in my brain, but when did he start calling Jack Jackie? because I don't think that Wolf started out calling him Jackie. Did he gradually segue into calling him Jackie after he decided that Jack was the herd? Or am I just misremembering and he always called him Jackie? Because Jackie's the name that like his dad called him. It's like kind of the pet name version. I don't know. Am I off base here?
So I thank you for buying me time as I pulled up my version of the book and looked.
That's one thing I'm good for is filling air.
So it seems like he started calling him it from the very beginning.
Okay.
And it seems like generally it's mostly at the beginning when Wolf is nervous or in need of help or something. He resorts to calling him Jackie.
Oh, okay. So it's almost more like a pleading tone than like
yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I went from not noticing it to noticing it, and I was like, does that mean that I'm just noticing it now, or does that mean that it just started happening? So anyway.
It's also like a lot of people call him Jackie because I'm like I basically went into my PDF of the book and searched for Jackie, and Sloat calls him Jackie as well.
But then it's always like more of a tone of superiority.
Yeah, definitely.
It's funny now because now I'm remembering like we've had this conversation before about like Bobby.
Yeah.
And you know all these boy names that have a diminutive form and how the diminutive form is often used by people who are trying to put them in a box and not allow them to grow up.
Yeah.
So you know Jack is a very manly grown up name. Jackie is a boy name.
Yeah, I think you could say, and you'd be fairly accurate, that Jack became Wolf's herd the second he saw him. So like there was no real delineation. Like he called him his herd right before he's about to turn into werewolf, but from the moment he comes across him, like Wolf automatically took the protective stance for him.
That's true. Yeah.
So we move on to chapter 22, titled The Sermon. At the beginning of this chapter, the 5 p.m. bell goes off, and Wolf starts losing his mind. I just want to reiterate what you said last week about us needing to remember and needing to clarify and constantly be thinking about the fact that everything that is happening that is bad for Jack is also really, really bad for Wolf, and also like worse in a lot of ways. And that is very true here. Jack is in a bad situation. Being at the Sunlight home for Jack is bad. Wolf is, as we'll see in a later chapter, literally dying being here. And so like it's awful. It's awful. Yeah.
It's very painful. It's more of the just piling it on to our characters' stuff.
Jack argues that if Wolf doesn't calm down, it's going to get him hurt. And Wolf responds with, "Someone might slap him around," Wolf said. His voice was low and mild, but his eyes suddenly narrowed, flared orange. For a moment, Jack saw the gleam of white teeth between Wolf's lips, not as if Wolf had grinned, but as if his teeth had grown. I love this as just like, the book is reminding us of Wolf's inherent danger, right? It's not just that he is in trouble. He can be trouble as well.
Yeah, I like that framing. It's interesting because when he's angry and he kind of starts to shift a little bit, it's even like the way he speaks changes. Like he's less of the like slow boher, like country fashion of speaking, and more just like, you know, this like the menacing, you know, someone might slap him around. It almost seems like he's becoming a slightly different character. This is something we talked about back when he was turning into a werewolf, where it's almost like he was becoming a little bit more intelligent, which may or may not be the case. It's more just like the inherent kindness goes away, and he just sort of becomes an actual predator.
Yeah, I think you're right there. The kindness too, but I think the aw shucksness as well just like fades, and yeah, the sinister, menacing nature of Wolf's other side kind of comes to the forefront. I think you're right. And then we get this part. The upstairs corridor should have been bright with late afternoon light, but it wasn't. It was as if some sort of filtering device had been fitted over the windows at the end of the corridor so that the boys could see out to where the real sunlight was. but that the light itself wasn't allowed to enter. It seemed to drop dead on the narrow inner sills of those high Victorian windows. I fucking love writing like this, Matt. Like, fuck subtlety forever. This place is called the Sunlight Home, and it doesn't allow sunlight in it. Do you get it, readers? It's bad. It's a bad, bad place.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Hell is the place devoid of God's light. So
yeah. There's no subtlety here, and I love it to fucking death.
And I love the wording. It seemed to drop dead on the narrow inner sills. Yeah.
This is the place where light goes to die. I do love also the detail of, like, it was as if some sort of filtering device has been fitted out over the windows, as if to say this is a conscious choice that the people that own this place, Sunlight Gardener, made the choice to block the light out of this place. And we're not told that specifically they put like one-way glass or anything. Like, it's just as if that happens. It's like he resists light so much that he stops it from entering. Which is, I mean, we haven't talked about that name, Sunlight Gardener, right? We haven't talked about the deliciousness of that name yet, which is in itself a walking contradiction. Sunlight, this man is clearly evil. Gardener, right? Like a person that tends a garden, tends to the crop. Yeah. In a much similar way to the way that wolf tends to a herd.
Yeah.
It's bullshit. His whole name is bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I mean, gardener and shepherd have a similar connotation. And
yeah, for sure.
That's, I mean, it makes me think that that's just a complete fake name. Like,
it has to be, right?
Like, his real name is probably something evil sounding, because evil men always have evil sounding names.
Yeah, like Shit-Stained McBad Guy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Everybody knows about Shit-Stained McBad Guy.
Imagine if your name was Shit-Stained McBad Guy, but like you were a pretty decent dude.
Uh-huh.
It's like imagine becoming Saint Shit-Stained McBad Guy for your contributions to Medal of Honor recipient.
Yeah,
Shit-Stained
patron saint of contradictions and subversion.
Yeah, I'm gonna have another kid just so I can name Shit-Stained McBad Guy.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. And then the book goes on to show us like a specific reason for why this is bad, because I think obviously the Sunlight Home, no good, but we haven't necessarily seen like tangible actual reasons for just how bad this place is, and it's time for the book to show us that. We see here poor Morton, who is a kid here, who is a member of the home, who has been made to stand there at attention outside of his dorm room door with his pants down and no underwear on. We learn here that apparently Morton was caught jerking off in his bunk, and this is his punishment. No underwear for a week. He doesn't get his underwear back until he stops doing it, and then forced public exposure and public ridicule. I don't think I have to actually say how monstrously cruel this is, right?
Yeah. Yeah, this is that kind of psychological abuse that'll just turn a kid into a serial killer, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
It's extremely fucked up. And I mean, it's one of these things where, you know, it would be bad enough if this were just a labor camp and Gardner were just exploiting the boys for their manual labor to make money. But I really think taking all of this week's reading holistically and, you know, focusing in on this moment, that Gardner's really more personally interested in the power and the control he's able to exert over these young men and this kind of stuff. Like, this is why he's doing this. I really don't think it's about the money for him.
Yeah, I think you're right. I do. So from here, we move on over to our nightly confession session, which somehow manages to ramp up our disturbance level even more. Somehow we from the poor torture of Morton, we go to 11 from there. I do really love this line, but what was most disturbing about confession was the eagerness with which the boys in the home greeted it, which is kind of our indication at how warped this place has made a lot of these kids. Yeah,
that's this whole sequence is quite disturbing.
I love the line. He's made them like their sins, which is just, it's just a delicious line.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. That's another moment where I was like, this is probably what he wants out of this. Like he is cultivating these boys into what he wants them to be. It's just that what he wants them to be is bad.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of the Morgan kidnapping a bunch of these sort of inherently sweet werewolves and turning them into monsters. It's like that's kind of what this character is doing here.
Yeah. And I mean, this is the fascinating thing about this, though, because I think the thing about these confessions are like, I mean, a lot of what we see here, like the one confession we're told that happens is a character named Roy Odersfelt, who stole some money from his parents that they desperately needed, which resulted in their gas bill getting shut off, which resulted in his brother getting pneumonia. And that's a pretty fucking horrible thing to happen, right? And I think that's the point here. Like many of these boys, certainly not all, as we know that the system is corrupt to the point where it's bringing any boy here, regardless of status or their statute or anything. Many of these boys have made mistakes in the past and are men that need help and understanding and kindness and guidance and everything that Sunlight Gardener should be and what he purports to do. But the fact that it's just a big sham is all the more irritating because a person like Roy needs help. Like he needs kindness and he needs like instruction on why the thing he did was so horrible, right? Mm-hmm. And this is not the way. This is not the way.
Well, I mean, I honestly, like I was thinking about this and I was reflecting on this because this is really quite a genuinely upsetting idea. And I was like, okay, I never stole money out of my mom's purse. I was a very good kid in the boring sense that I was obedient and I didn't try to break rules because I had internalized the rules. But I think that said, I think that adults forget how compelling the idea of stealing is to kids because for a kid, you're like, I really want that thing. And if I just take it, then I will have it. And that's what I want. So I'll, and the amount of like civilizing socialization that has to happen to make a kid not do that is actually pretty extreme. So like holding stealing against a kid to me is just like, it's like, okay, it's not good to steal. The kid should be punished. But obviously they don't deserve to be thrown into a prison hell because they stole some money. Like the natural consequence of stealing from your mom's purse is that the boy then realizes that he harmed his family members through his action, and he feels horrible about it. And that would be more than enough to make him feel guilty and never do it again in all likelihood. But now we've like perverted the natural process of like, making a mistake, learning from the mistake. And we're like, we're going to ruin your life over this. We're going to like punish you so excessively that you'll lose all sense that the universe has justice or makes any sense whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, to your point, like I very distinctly have this memory. I must have been like 7 years old and I came home from school and on the banister going up the stairs, there was just like $40, mm-hmm. like just on the banister. And my kid brain said, sweet, I get to buy that X-Wing I wanted, which of course the money was for the pizza guy when my mom had ordered pizza. Uh-huh. And so, but like, it didn't even occur to me. Like that didn't even occur to my stupid kid brain. I was just like, oh, look, money. Uh-huh. Now I get thing I want. So I think you're absolutely right there. And I do think a lot of this is this kind of really interesting distortion of Christianity. Like obviously there is some of the stuff that is absolutely true to Christianity, but like the confession is one of the most important sacraments in, specifically Catholicism. Mm-hmm. But confession is private. It is you, a priest, and God. Yeah. And it's not like this whole idea is you are airing the worst things you've ever done in front of the entire group. And so like, we had Morton here. How did they know he was jerking off in his bunk? Probably because he confessed it in public to everyone. Uh-huh. And this is the result of it, right? Like this is like, it's horrifying. Yeah. It's absolutely horrifying. And of course, like this gets into another topic I wanted to talk about, which is, this is another example of Stephen King taking aim at religion, right? We've talked about this before. I think it's important to reiterate before we get into this that King is a spiritual, quote unquote, person, not a religious person. And it's very clear through all the stories we've read so far that he has a fundamental problem with the way organized religion operates, specifically the ways in which it is used as a tool to control, manipulate, and benefit from people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so here we have Reverend Gardner, a man of faith. I put that in big quotes, using God and faith and belief as a tool to get power and control people, not help them, but use them to make money, use them to get power, use them for his own sick enjoyment, which, you know, as you said earlier, it's mostly those last two things.
I agree. It's those last two things. Yeah.
But it's really interesting the way, like, and I think that's important in this book because we've seen religious, quote unquote, characters in the story that are good people. Wolf is one of them, right? Like there's, you can draw a very clear delineation between Wolf and Gardner. Wolf shepherd, Gardner, right? Yeah. Like these are people that are operating under the same general moral principles, supposedly, but they are doing vastly different things with them.
Yeah, well, it's the difference between, you know, walking the walk and walking the talk or whatever.
Yeah.
Talking, you know what I mean? Because you can justify anything by just like contorting scripture, but a person like Wolf or like you know, the captain of the guard, whose name is escaping me, like they're Farron, yeah, they're trying to do what's right, you know. They're just trying to do what's right.
Yeah, I totally. And so this is, I think, a character that absolutely disgusts Stephen King. And so he loves writing about these fucking terrible people.
Mm-hmm. My favorite.
So Gardner once again asks Jack where he knows him from, and Jack once again denies him, which gets him in trouble with Singer and Bast, who attempt to beat up on Jack. But we see here that Jack stands up to them. Jack got to his feet. "You want to watch out for me," he said quietly to them both. And although Hector Bass only glowered, Sonny Singer looked almost scared. For a moment, he seemed to see something in Jack Sawyer's face that was both strong and forbidding. Something that had not been there almost 2 months ago, when a much younger boy had set the small seafront town of Arcadia Beach to his back and had begun walking west.
Good stuff.
I think this is really, really great because, you know, we noted from the very beginning of the book that Jack has a tendency to mouth off to people, right? Like he got angry and mouthed off to the asshole clerk at the hotel. He got angry and mouthed off to Sonny. The difference is, it seems like as each event unfolds, his ability to back up that mouthing off with like a real sense of power and control behind it is increasing.
Yeah. Right. Now, I distinctly remember we talked about the idea of mouthing off being a Russell conjugation for standing up for yourself.
Yeah.
Where, you know, it's mouthing off if you can't actually back up what your mouth is saying, basically. Yeah. But now he's becoming the person who can back that up, actually.
Yeah. It's pretty great. It's pretty great. So they head to dinner and then to night chapel for even more church, because there just wasn't enough church, Matt. We see here the true scope of Sunlight Gardner's machinations. His chapel is just a fancy TV studio, and they're recording audio and video of everything that happens here for his evangelical exploits. For some reason, Jack finds this hilarious, which isn't the first time he's just gotten a giggle fit in the middle of a situation where giggling could get him in a lot of trouble. What do you make of this? What do you make of this kind of recurring beat?
I don't have a pattern here. I mean, I guess I just saw him finding this specific situation as being really absurd.
Yeah,
like
definitely
cosmically absurd. But I mean, you're totally right though, that this is a motif. I don't know what it means. No real theory at this point.
Well, let's keep paying attention to it.
Okay.
So the sermon begins, and Sunlight Gardner reads some select parts of Psalm 37. It says here, "Fret not thyself because of evildoers," said Sunlight Gardner, his voice low, musical, thoughtful. "Neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity, for they shall soon be cut down like the grass, and wither as the green herb. Trust in the Lord, and do good, so shalt thou dwell in the territories." Jack Sawyer felt his heart take a nasty, leaping turn in his chest. "And verily, thou shalt be fed." Now, I spent a fair amount of time today, Matt, looking at a lot of the translations of this psalm in the Bible. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to go ahead and let you know, none use the word territories. Not a single solitary one of them use the word territories. It's always mostly just the word land. So this is deliberate on behalf of King and Straub. It's not like they were just like, they came up with the name of the territories from a psalm and then worked it in later. No, they just edited the Bible to use the word territories, or rather, Sunlight Gardner edited the Bible.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea that it was actually the character who did it, because he's kind of being tongue in cheek about the idea that he knows about this other place and he knows what it's called, and maybe it's even a sort of dog whistle to question, actually, is this being broadcast or is this being recorded for later broadcast? The latter, right?
I believe it is being broadcast over audio, but is being recorded for later video broadcasts.
Okay, because I was unclear, because part of me was thinking like, oh, is Jack gonna like make a scene here, and that's gonna be how we move the plot forward? But obviously we didn't do that. Anyway, the reason I mention it is like maybe he's literally broadcasting, his sort of territories knowledge to the world. I don't know, just spitballing here.
Yeah, interesting stuff. So Sunlight sums up the psalm: don't sweat it. Don't worry about what bad people are doing, because God will take care of them. Just do good, believe in God, and it'll be fine. Which is, to be honest, a fair interpretation of what the psalm is talking about. It's not like we see him completely misinterpret the words of the psalm. I think the argument here is that it depends on who you're labeling us, the bad guys and the good guys. Well, what do you think about this?
Well, I think it hinges on how you define doing good. So the fact that it's coming out of Gardner's mouth just makes it feel manipulative in the first place. Yeah. So it's like, okay, there's some wisdom to the idea that we shouldn't let ourselves be bothered by people around us being jerkholes. Like, that's just basic stoicism. It's probably just a good habit to get into. Don't let people bother you too much. At the same time, though, it can be read as a suggestion to just let evils and injustices pass totally unaddressed, because, hey, God will take care of it. You just keep your head down and do your own thing and don't worry about anybody else. And, I think, Jack specifically shouldn't just believe in God and he'll be fine. He should do something when and where he's able to. It's sort of cowardice to say, okay, don't worry about iniquity that you see or that is being done to you. Just grin and bear it. That's not a good, unambiguously good message.
And I don't think I think a biblical scholar would look at that psalm and say, no, that is definitely not what God is telling you to do here. That just like let injustices go because I've got it. I think this is more, I think this is a psalm that gets to me one of the fundamental reasons why religion exists. That this idea that the world sucks and it's hard and you're often suffering and miserable and you're trying to be a good person, and you look around and there are these shitty people out there doing shitty things, and religion can at least be a soft comfort to people to be like, don't worry about it. Our time here is relatively fleeting, and when it's up, they will be taken care of, and so will you. Like this comfort of like, the world sucks and is unfair, but it's going to be okay in the long run. That's to me what the message of this thing is. Like, don't worry about how a bad person's getting away with something. Don't worry about it cosmically, because I got that. And so I do think it's kind of a perversion of this to Sunlight. It's just like, hey man, don't sweat it. I don't think the message is don't sweat it. I don't think it is. It's just like, don't become obsessive with the inequities of other people.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing is when I say it's not unambiguously good advice, it's like, it is good advice for if you're the kind of person who's prone to obsessing over wrongs that were done to you 37 years ago. And all the perpetrators are long dead and you're still obsessed about it. It's like, okay, that person needs to hear, God will take care of you. God will take care of this. Don't worry about it. And then, that might bring them some solace. It's funny to me because this seems to me like such a New Testament vibe. But Psalms are the Old Testament. So I mean, obviously I'm not the world's greatest religious scholar. I just find it slightly surprising. Like that didn't remember this sort of thing being in the Old Testament. But whatever.
Sure. I mean, I could be taking a very New Testament, read on an an Old Testament read of this could either be like, don't worry, I'm going to kill him. Don't worry about it. I got him. I'm gonna fucking electrocute him. It's going to be fucking awesome because I'm God. I'm a badass. Don't worry about it.
Trust in the Lord. Do your thing because God's going to rain down fire. Yeah.
No, I think that's great though, because I do think sunlight is a very Old Testament type of reverend, whereas I think you look at Wolf as a much more New Testament type of person.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think this is importantly like one of the big problems with basing your entire belief system on words that can be read differently based on the way you want to read them. I mean, that's the big problem here, is that Sunlight Gardner is reading the same words we are, and he's doing something way different, because to him, the people trying to shut down his prison camp home are the evil ones that God will take care of. Although he's not even, see, that's the thing, is as his sermon continues, he tells us more about what's going on, right? He says the state has tried to shut them down a couple times, but never successfully. A few boys who decided to talk about what was really going on have mysteriously disappeared, or as Gardner has said, were sent into the territories, which has a lot of underlying threat in it, right? Like God sent Cain out, and I will send you out if you betray me, which is in essence positioning himself as God, right? Like if he's the one saying, don't sweat it, don't worry about it, the evildoers will be taken care of because I'm doing it. I am actively murdering children who try to rat on me. That's you kind of a hypocrite there, right, buddy.
I think almost like the one yardstick to tell whether somebody is doing religion correctly or not is whether they think of God as being external and that they might fall short and they can do better, or whether they think basically God just agrees with them, whatever they do or say. Yeah. Which is obviously what Gardner thinks.
That is true. What a piece of shit this guy is.
He is a piece of shit. I hope something horrible happens to him.
I like this last line here. But if you weaken, if you lie, then woe unto you. Hell awaits the backslider just as it awaits the boy or man who dives into it on purpose. No, it doesn't. That's not how that works, Reverend.
If you lie, you're going to hell.
Yeah. If you backslide, if you struggle with your sin. Oh, wait, that's literally every human being ever. Having
young kids, it makes it really clear how you could tell them, like, did you know that if you don't wash your hands correctly, you'll go to hell? Like, they would actually believe that and be horrified because they don't know anything. So you can tell them whatever and they believe it because they trust you. Like, that's why this is so dangerous.
Well, yeah, well, we were told that giving the middle finger is saying the F word to God. That's what I was told when I was a little kid. And so I was terrified of ever doing it.
Even accidentally.
Yeah. Because I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
To God? Yeah. I don't want to do that.
Even if you do it accidentally and you like tell him that it was an accident, like, are you sure that he heard you? Like, is this a confession? Do I need to confess about this?
Mr. Priest, please come. I put my middle finger up.
Do people not know that they're fucking children up when they tell them these things?
I don't know.
They must not, because
I'm like not trying to rake my parents over the coals or anything. I don't think they do. I don't think they did. I think we're getting better at this now.
Yeah. Well, I think we remember remember how bad certain things were. We're making a whole rash of new and different fun mistakes, but
of course, that's life, right?
Yeah. Not those same ones though.
So we move on to our next chapter, chapter 23, titled Ferd Jenklow.
My favorite king name ever.
Why is it your favorite king name ever?
I mean, Jenklow is already the best name by itself. And then Ferd, which I guess is short for like Ferdinand.
Yes.
But Ferd. Ferd. It's my mouth just loves to make that sound. Ferd Jenklow. My mouth just, I sing to hear it. It's amazing.
So we jump in time here a bit about a week later and into Jack and Wolf's time here at the Sunlight home. And Jack has already decided that the way to get out of this thing is to flip. Once again, the way to escape is to flip over to the territories, even if he's not quite sure how to do that, because remember, he doesn't have his magic juice anymore. I love this idea that Jack is afraid to flip in the home itself. You know, he makes the assumption that the territories version of this place would somehow be even worse. So he's got to figure out a way to get outside of the grounds first before he even contemplates getting over.
Yeah, and he's so sure that it'll be worse that he doesn't even seriously consider the idea of flipping inside.
Yeah, like I think he says like that there's like a core to some places in the world that just go all the way down, that this place is just an evil place, which I think aligns with what we saw with Wolf and his understanding of these ancient places of power, that you dare not do anything, that there's just probably some ancient evil places as well.
Yeah, I just basically assume that he's exactly right here. You know, this is probably literally like a torture dungeon of Osmond on the other side.
Yeah. But before Jack was ready to try escaping, Ferd Jenklo tried.
Never gets old.
So we meet Ferd as Jack is out working in the fields with him, and they're having a conversation. And the conversation they're having here is worth discussing here, Matt. Basically, they're discussing the idea that another Sunlight kid, Donnie Keegan, is actually in love with Jack Sawyer, and he's not the only one. We see here, oddly, Jack found himself thinking of the nice man who had offered to take him home and who had then settled for dropping him off at the mall exit near Zanesville. He saw it first, Jack thought. Whatever's new about me, that man saw it first. And I just wanted to get your reaction to this bit here, that people seem to really love old Jack.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit, but you know, I'm torn between the idea that it could either be natural or it could be supernatural. So the natural explanation is just like he's been going through these trials and tribulations, and they have shaped him into a sort of Aragorn figure where, you know, he's been elevated through his experiences. People can just sense the positive qualities radiating off of him. The supernatural explanation is more like he's sort of becoming Jason. He's sort of becoming a messiah figure, magically absorbing these sort of savior figure energies from the territories. Kind of ambivalent as to which it is at this point. But definitely the natural explanation seems to be at least plausible to me.
Sure. No, I like that. No comment from me, but I like that.
Cool.
So Ferd suddenly takes off running and then disappears from the story. We don't know if he got out or if they took him out, although some people have some words about what happened to Ferd a little bit later in this chapter, but no reason to believe them, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be very mad. You better take care of my boy Ferd. I'm very invested in Ferd.
All right. We flash back to Ferd talking to Jack earlier, and we learn just how deep this whole thing goes. Sunlight Gardener seems to have everyone in the whole state in his pocket. He gets warned about surprise inspection, so he has time to hide all the less than favorable parts of the home, and we see that he is actually super, super rich. I love this passage here. I've heard Casey put a blue box on Gardner's phone so he can make long-distance phone calls free, and I know damned well he's spliced a line into the pay TV cable that goes out front. You like the idea of Mr. Ice Cream Man settling back and watching a big double feature on Cinemax after a hard day of selling Jesus to the masses? I like it. This guy is as American as spinner hubcaps, Jack, and here in Indiana, they love him almost as much as they love high school basketball.
It's great. This is why I love Ferd, though. Like, he has this cynical, it's almost like the authorial voice of cynical condemnation of, I don't know, of what this guy is doing specifically, of the greater, like, dark, seedy underbelly of America, you could say.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fun wrapped up in this, in the Ferd character, though.
Is Ferd gay? Because they use a slur against him, and it never specifically says it, but we get told like that he's, you know, the reason for him being here is kind of vague, right? That he has a differences in opinion from his parents. He's a completely different type of person than his parents, and he's run away multiple times. And one of those runaways gets him sent here.
Now that you say that, it seems extremely plausible. It's not it didn't occur to me, but I think that's like, you know, the fact that a slur is used, I'm actually inclined to say like in the 80s and 90s that was just like the word "and" in English.
Yeah, yeah.
But it could very well be. I actually think that's somewhat likely. Yeah,
I think you're right. Like the slur in question is the word queer, I believe. And like it could literally just be a derogatory term that they use to throw at anyone because that's just what people did back then, right? Yeah. But I don't know. I think I'm not like spoiling the idea if we ever learn more about Ferd. I legitimately don't remember that. And so my feeling is and was that he is, and this is like he I don't know, I like this idea of, you know, beyond that he sees this place and he sees this man and he sees this world in a way that no one else here does, and this is kind of why none of this worked on him. Yeah,
that this is maybe a root cause of his hurt laugh, which I just love. God, I love the hurt laugh so much.
Yeah. I meant to pull that. I highlighted it in my book and I forgot to grab it. But yeah, that's wonderful. Jack is pulled out of his memory of his conversation with Ferd by Heck Bast, who says that Ferd was found and completely beaten up and is in a hospital, and it'll be a long time before he recovers. But we refuse to believe him. We don't. He's lying, right?
He's definitely lying.
He starts beating the crap out of him, and Wolf interjects, grabbing Heck's hand and smashing it into nothing. It's so satisfying, isn't it?
It is very satisfying. It seems like a very short-lived satisfaction, but it's literally the only time that any meaningful strike back has been made against the bullies.
Yeah. And Wolf keeps talking here about how hurting the herd is just completely out of the question. And it's worth using Wolf. We've already kind of done this, but I want to reiterate it here. It's worth using Wolf as a reflection of Gardner here, as Christianity uses the shepherd and sheep metaphor quite a bit, right? The idea that the Lord and his instruments as being shepherds of men, and the idea of a priest or reverend or shepherd abusing their flock is just so fucking unimaginable to Wolf, who understands the point of being a shepherd, but it is the business that Gardner operates in regularly.
It's so funny because I literally didn't even occur to me that Wolf was angered by like the hypocrisy of it, because I didn't even take seriously the idea that these people were trying to shepherd the boys. But obviously, obviously that is what he's reacting to.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then here we see, you know, Wolf sort of not going along with what the Psalm would say, because like if you're the shepherd, you can't just shrug it off if people are doing iniquity upon your sheep. Yeah. You have to stop them. You have to defend the sheep like Wolf does.
Yeah, I think you're right. For his crime here, Wolf is taken away and put into the box. And if things were bad for Wolf before, this is an escalation of that. We see that he screams nonstop all night while in this thing. Like, I mean, and you imagine, we don't exactly know what the box is. It's a small confined space, right? And to Wolf, that's hell. That's literal hell.
Yeah. This has been well established that he does not enjoy that.
And Gardner makes it clear to Jack that all he has to do to let Wolf out of the box is tell him where he knows him from. But Jack can't do it. He won't do it. It's a price he's just completely willing to pay. Wolf's suffering is a price he's willing to pay to protect his mother. But that price is pretty steep, Matt, because when he sees Wolf the next day, it's clear that not only is he dying, but also that the time in the box is bringing on his werewolf change as well.
So we get, not good.
So many ticking clocks.
Yep.
And I, as if to break your heart even further and endear it to Wolf forever, Jack says to him, Gardner set a price for letting you out, Jack said, but I couldn't pay it. I wanted to, but Wolf, my mother. His voice blurred and wavered towards tears. Shh, Jackie, Wolf knows, right here and now. Wolf smiled his terrible wan smile again and took Jack's hand. So like he just accepts it. He just like says, I get it. I accept it. I put that pain on myself for you. You know, I know we've been making a lot of Jack as Jesus metaphor, but Wolf really being the Jesus figure in this instance.
That's true. Well, I've always thought that dogs made the best Christians because they like I mean, they intrinsically have all of the qualities that humans wish they had, where they're just like perfectly loving and forgiving, and can like accidentally smash them with a tool or something, and they're just like, oh, I'm sorry.
Sure.
I'm sorry I was in your way. And
dogs make the best Christians. That's great. I love it.
I've actually thought this for many years. But you know, and then maybe Jack learns from Wolf here, and he gets his savior qualities from Wolf in that way.
I like that.
But you know, it's interesting because like not clear to me why exactly Jack doesn't just cave. I mean, other than like just sheer spine and being like, I'm just not going to give in to this asshole.
Yeah.
Like, what is what would the cost be if he told him like, yeah, we met in the territories?
Yeah, I do. This is my big critique of this part. I think it is really important that we understand, and I think the book does a really good job making us understand that Jack is put in a terrible situation here, having to make a choice, right? But I do agree that we're not exactly clear on why he believes that telling him will definitely like, obviously he says my mother, right? He says that he's doing this to protect his mom. That what do you mean? I mean, like I could like squint at it and be like, okay, so if you tell Gardner that the place you know him from is the territories where you met his twinner, and let's pretend Gardner knows that place exists and travels there often and is like, oh my God, you're Jack Sawyer. You're the one that our Lord Morgan is looking for. I'm going to come get you. Right. So I guess maybe that's it. That that the quest will be screwed. Like, I just like, it's obviously the book has made you really love Wolf and really feel for Wolf and Wolf's suffering, which will continue into the next chapter. And so to me, it needs to be very crystal clear the full extent of why Jack is making this incredibly hurtful choice to Wolf to prioritize his quest. And I agree that it's a little confused.
Right. Normally I wouldn't nitpick in this way, but I think it's important that it be a little bit spelled out to us, because it's not even clear from Jack's own perspective. Like, is that his motivation? Like how much of this is just fuck you, I'm not going to tell you shit because I hate you, and how much of it is like what you just said? And I don't really have any idea. Yeah.
I mean, my assumption is it started out the fuck you stubbornness, but it has shifted into, like, as he gets closer and closer to the edge, it is, I am legitimately terrified for my mother.
Yeah.
And that this will effectively end my quest and damn her.
Yeah.
Which I get why he would believe that, for sure. I do think I wish the book spelled it out a little more, because you're right. I mean, like, objectively, we're in the situation where Jack is saying, sorry, Wolf, they told me I could help you by telling them the truth, and I just can't do it. And so like that's incredibly cruel to poor Wolf, and he's so understanding of it. So it's a like, it doesn't ruin the scene for me at all. It doesn't, like, I still love this whole part of the book very much, but I'm kind of going to be mentally worrying at this one, because I'm not sure why they chose to set it up the way they did, because they could have just not had the element of Sunlight Gardner recognizing him in the first place, and then that all just wouldn't be in there. So I don't know. We'll see if there's something in the next chapters that kind of help me untangle this. Sure. Speaking of the next chapters, we now move on to our final chapter of the week, a pretty short one called Jack Names the Planets. It starts off with another week in the Sunlight home. Praise God. The moon put on weight. Which there's so many ticking clocks in this story right now, right? There's the ticking clock of Jack's mother is every day getting closer and closer to death. Now we have the ticking clock of Wolf slowly turning back into a werewolf, and just the general ticking clock of Wolf wasting away slowly, that he's dying. On top of turning back into a killer werewolf, he's dying.
Yeah, it's almost like, which one of those things do we want to happen first?
Yeah. I love and hate this passage here. It wasn't meanness And Jack knew it wasn't just the box that had taken it. Not even just the sunlight home. It was the whole world. Wolf was simply pining for home. He had lost most of his vitality. He smiled rarely and laughed not at all. When Warwick yelled at him at lunch for eating with his fingers, Wolf cringed. So like he's broken, like they broke him, and it's so sad.
Yeah, we really just want to see the big lug get out of the situation.
Yeah, they made us fall in love with this goofy wolf man, and now they're just torturing him. It's so sad.
I know. We've talked before about the idea that there's actually a point of torturing your characters past which you're just like, all right, I'm decoupling, right? Because it's like it's like you fill up your bank with endearment and love, and then you kind of withdraw from the bank, and at a certain point you're like, all right, I'm no longer enjoying this. And I'm not saying we're there yet, but I do feel like if we turn the screws on poor Wolf too much longer, I might start to get a little bit frustrated,
Sure.
I don't know. I mean, again, this is a subjective thing. I'm not like judging the book on the basis of this. I'm just saying like that's how fed up with seeing Wolf get hurt that I'm feeling.
That's very fair. But it's not going well for Jack either, Matt. He's dragged before the Reverend and beaten by Sonny and Heck as he demands that he tell him where he knows him from, demands that he confess. And I think now might be the first time where we actually start to worry about Jack's ability to stand up to torture, right? That like this might actually break him as well. Mm-hmm. Jack goes to Rudolph, a dishwasher in the kitchen who delivered notes for good old Ferd, and asks him for help getting out of this place. But Rudolph refuses, says, I wouldn't do it for any money in the world. I'm terrified of Sunlight Gardener. He says, he's a devil from hell. I'll tell you something I never told nobody else. One week he was late giving me my pay envelope, and I went downstairs to his office. Most times I don't. I don't like to go down there, but this time I had to. Well, I had to see a man. I needed my money in a hurry, you know what I mean? And I seen him go down the hall and into his office, so I knew he was in there. I went down and knocked on his door, and it swung open when I did because it hadn't completely latched. And you know what, kid? He wasn't there. So this is our conclusive evidence that he's traveling to the territories, Sunlight Gardener is.
Yeah. And what Jack is going to do with this, we're not really sure.
Mm-hmm. Maybe he has some magic juice in his office that helps him flip, and he can steal his juice.
Yeah, maybe so. That's a good, or just something that he could use. Yeah.
Yeah. At 4 a.m. the next morning, Jack is once again woken up and taken for his confession. Jack once again refuses to confess, saying he's from all the planets in the solar system, which is where the Jack names the planets title comes from.
Yeah.
I think it's such a wild, like, I don't know. What did you think when you read heard the chapter title, Jack names the planets?
I mean, my first thought was something like looking at the stars and giving the planets names, not just iterating through through the names of the planets.
I come from Uranus, asshole. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great.
And so that is the end of our chapter. We end this chapter on a pretty bad note, Matt. I think the last thing Jack says here at the end of this chapter is, okay, it's time. I got to escape now today.
Yep.
And which is great. And I'm glad he just like goes, okay, now's the time. But like, how?
Yeah, right. Exactly. He's decided, though. He's going to use his kingly powers and he's just going to do it.
Fortunately, everything is going to get better in the next chapter, which is titled Jack and Wolf Go to Hell. Oh, no.
That sounds bad. I'm a literary scholar. That sounds bad.
That's great analysis there, Matt. I love it. But that's going to do it for us this week, at least on this part of the show, because we have a whole discussion question section to still get into, Matt.
We sure do.
What was our discussion question to our audience last week?
The question was, what is your favorite werewolf story? What are, in your opinion, the key elements that make a good werewolf story?
All right, let's go through them.
From Just Stand 8460, we have the key elements. Number 1, the person loses control and once changed becomes incredibly dangerous, replacing their human nature with that of the beast they transform into. This produces a great dichotomy as well as a level of distrust in the character throughout the story. I especially like it when the person is usually kind and unassuming. Number 2, the person must encounter a struggle that forces them to address their monstrous side and overcome their changing nature to protect those they care about, either by somehow learning to stop themselves from changing or doing something to prevent themselves from hurting others after changing. For example, locking themselves in a cage. They then go on to list some examples. I do not need to follow any standard lore involved, and I'm fine with it being some sort of freak scientific accident, like the Incredible Hulk, the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I enjoy the Harry Potter version most. We meet Professor Lupin first as a frumpy, unkept, sleeping man on the Hogwarts Express, whom we later come to endear ourselves to due to his kindness and loyalty to Harry and his quartet. He seems to have somewhat mastered his transformation, but we are not sure how. We also gain more affection for him later when we get a glimpse at his boyhood at Hogwarts and see his 2 closest friends, Sirius and James, choose to work out the complex magic of becoming animagi, form of a giant dog and a stag, just to help control these bouts. Finally, it is revealed that in order to stop his time of the month, he must drink a difficult and complex potion, like an IUD, but administered by the cold hands of Severus Snape. He exhibits the above key elements. Also, I would not categorize the animagi in Harry Potter as the were-creatures because they do not exhibit the inclinations of said animals. They still seem to possess their own human faculties and also have the ability to change back and forth at will. Yes, I agree that just the ability to change form by itself does not constitute what we mean when we say werewolf.
Yeah.
That's not the tropes.
Cool. I like that answer a lot. Thank you. And I agree with those 2 elements. And I like just Stand your looseness with which you categorize this stuff, because it doesn't matter. You know, like I sure, Incredible Hulk and Jekyll and Hyde, sure, that fits. I love it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like the Incredible Hulk is somebody sitting there and thinking about folklore and thinking how do you modernize that? You know?
Yeah. I'm in the middle of an argument with someone who's continuously saying that 28 Days Later is not a zombie movie because they're technically not zombies because they're not undead. And I'm just like, what is the point at this what is the point of classifying things if 28 Days Later doesn't fall into the zombie movie paradigm? What is the point of classifying zombie movies at all?
Right.
In every other possible way, it is a zombie movie, except that they're not. I don't care is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like the Hulk is a werewolf and 28 Days Later is a zombie movie.
It's all exactly. It's what are we using this for?
Yeah.
That's what words are. They're tools.
Yeah. Next we have Baby Can You Dig Your Sam, who says one of the scariest werewolf stories is the I was a teenage werewolf scene from It. Not going into it due to spoilers, but a terrifically scary scene. And Matt, are you intrigued?
I'm pretty intrigued.
A werewolf in the clown book?
A werewolf in the clown book? Whatever could happen in that
You know
book.
so much about the clown book from Cultural Osmosis.
I do.
It pisses me off.
I do. It's very frustrating. It's very frustrating. All right, next we have Belwas Deserved Better. Every time I see that name, I don't think Belwas is dead. But anyway.
Wait, who's Belwas?
Strong Belwas in Song of Ice and Fire.
Yes, okay.
My favorite take on the werewolf story comes from my favorite anime, Futurama. In The Honking... Sorry, I read that before my brain processed it. In The Honking, Bender is run over by a werecar and proceeds to turn into some sort of unimaginable mechanical beast that creeps along the ground on 4 wheels instead of hovering like a respectable 31st century vehicle. After terrorizing friends and strangers alike, Bender and the Planet Express crew must track down the original werecar and destroy it to cure him of the curse. Bonus points for being king adjacent in that it is also related to the novel Christine. Maybe I'm just excited that Futurama is coming back again. Yeah,
that's a great example.
Futurama coming back again is something that I have so many emotions about.
I didn't know that Futurama was coming back. That's cool.
I don't know how 100% that is, but I've heard that said before. So
that's a really fun episode of that show. The Honking is a playoff of The Howling, which is another werewolf story that no one picked here, I don't think, but it's a pretty fun werewolf movie.
Interesting. Okay, never heard of it.
Dirkus19 says there's so many good werewolf stories, but my favorite recently has been the short Shapeshifters that is part of the Love, Death, and Robots series on Netflix. It's a really good story of what could happen if we had to integrate were people into society.
I feel like we saw that one, but now I don't remember the details of it.
We definitely did. Yeah, it's the one where the army is using werewolves to fight to fight terrorists in the Middle East.
That was good. Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah.
I like that concept.
Yeah, and it's really good. I complained about it in the episode at the time, that my problem with the whole metaphor of minorities as were creatures, it falls a little bit apart. This is similar to my complaint about Zootopia, where they tried to make the carnivores into oppressed minorities. And I just was like, yeah, I get it, and I like the metaphor, and I appreciate what you're doing, but also they're literal carnivores that would eat the other people. So your metaphor, it's not a good look.
What does the lion eat is my question.
But not everyone agrees with that opinion, and that's like, I think that's a great little short. I think the animation in that one is particularly great as well.
I mean, it's funny because I don't normally endorse nitpicks like this, but like, you just need to show us one scene where it's like the lion eating tofu, and then I'm good, you know?
I feel like that's in the movie, though.
It might be.
Not?
It might be. I don't remember. I don't think it is, but if it is, then I'm an idiot and I'm wrong. So everyone send me emails to I don't give a shit at whatever.com. All right.
I'm gonna make an I don't give a shit at doofmedia.com and I'm gonna forward them all to your account.
Please do. Thank you. All 84001 says, as a child of the 80s who was always looking for ways to have fun that could possibly seriously injure myself and my friends, I gotta mention Teen Wolf, if only for its contribution to the lexicon of teenage mayhem and general hell raising, namely van surfing and biting into cans of beer. It also normalized the wearing of sunglasses for wolves, to which the world is forever indebted. But is it good? No. Most certainly not. Neither is my second mention, another 80s cinematic cheese fest, Monster Squad, which gave us the immortal epithet, Wolfman's got nards, uttered in disbelief by one of the titular squad mates after swiftly kicking a werewolf in the crotch. I guess I only enjoy a light smattering of werewolf in my stories. Side characters or B-plots, never as the main focus.
Have you seen Teen Wolf, Matt?
I've seen parts of Teen Wolf. I've never sat down and watched it. Because,
spoilers for the rest of this conversation, it's going to show up a lot.
I'm going to have to watch Teen Wolf, I guess.
Yeah. Next, we have Mountain Dave 1979, who says, one of my favorite werewolf stories is in the underrated 80s cult classic, The Monster Squad. Hey, there we go again. Often overshadowed by The Goonies, many have not seen this flick about a group of kids dealing with overwhelming odds as monsters take over a town. The main characters are all monster movie obsessives, even rocking a sweet Stephen King Rules t-shirt. While discussing the rules of fighting the Wolfman, there's an argument about ways to kill it. Silver bullet, and one encounter leads to my favorite movie quote, Wolfman's got nards. So we got some simpatico coming between these answers here.
Oh my God.
I think this is a good example because it shows the out of control nature of the Wolfman and the tortured soul of the human who, after being shot with a silver bullet, is thankful of being released. Remember, only the silver bullet, not regular bullets, sticks of dynamite, or being kicked in the nards.
That's great.
Yeah.
For some reason, I'm just now remembering the connection to the Skin Man. Like the Skin Man that didn't jump into my mind literally at any point until this exact moment. I
guess I thought about it, but I didn't say it. So yes, the Skin Man is another werewolf adjacent character in the Dark Tower lexicon.
Dark Tower werewolf, another Dark Tower werewolf, but obviously a very, very different kind.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next, Walking Dude 22 says, I saw a werewolf with the Chinese menu in his hand walking through the streets of Soho in the rain. He was looking for a place called Lai Ho Fook's gonna get a big dish of beef chow mein. Is this a song that I don't... Oh.
It is.
Howl, Werewolves of London, Howl. Yeah, I recognized it like 2/3 of the way through. So now I look like a fucking idiot. Anyway, epic song by Warren Zevon. Not exactly my favorite werewolf story, but it does lead to it. Hands down, the best werewolf movie ever made is the John Landis classic, An American Werewolf in London. The tale is simple enough. Two American hitchhikers backpacking through Europe are attacked by a beast on the moors. One dies, and then the survivor starts having dreams and seeing the dead. By the next full moon, the survivor confirms that he is, in fact, a werewolf. The entirely practical special effects still hold up, and the movie is both full of comedy and horror beats. Honorable mention goes to the worst werewolf movie titled Werewolf. The 1997 film was riffed in an episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000. The star power consists of Emilio Estevez's Uncle Joe. The transformation scene looks like a battle with incontinence, and the plot hardly moves at all. The riff track transforms this unwatchable mess into a delightfully funny experience.
Matt, have you seen An American Werewolf in London?
That's another one where I think I've seen. Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, I have. I like that one.
The transformation sequence in that movie is an all-timer. If you haven't seen, watch the movie. It's great, everyone. But if you haven't seen the actual completely practical guy transforms into wolf scene, it's just wonderful. It's one of those things that I saw at a very young age and like warped my brain forever to make me love really disgusting body horror. Like that and The Fly, I think was the 1-2 punch of me going like, oh my God, I love this shit. It makes me so viscerally uncomfortable and I love it.
Yeah. Just good practical effects, body horror stuff. Really, really well pulled off. It's one of those things where they cut so cleverly that you're just really swept into the illusion of like, oh my God, the man's turning into a werewolf. So. Yeah,
and I don't. Maybe I'm wrong about this. I feel like it holds up too. Like there a lot of this practical stuff. Sometimes you just be like, oh, that looks fake, but they do such a good job with everything with it that it just works, and I love it.
Yeah, I think it does. I haven't watched it in a while, but I think it does.
Next, we have Emperor Fry the Solid, who says, yay, I have another silly Piers Anthony magic ability answer. In the book Spell for Chameleon, the girl supposedly doesn't have magical powers. She's about to be banished from Xanth, yada, yada, yada. Our trusty hero's journey reader, insert protagonist Vaughn, what's his name? Is that really what his name is?
I don't know.
It's funny. Is escorting her out of the country, which takes a few weeks, and he's like, am I crazy? Or is she getting hotter? Narrator. He wasn't crazy. Every month, Chameleon cycles between hot and dumb and smart and ugly. Ladies and their cycles, am I right? Oh my gosh. In a move that shocks everyone, she's likable in both forms and they fall in love. It's like Shrek. Exactly even when she's a wolf, or that is the less attractive woman with agency. That's wild.
That's hilarious. That's very, very funny. I really enjoy that.
That's crazy.
That's some social commentary right there.
That is definitely some social commentary. It's funny because I know I've talked about this last time. Emperor Fry the Solid picked a Piers Anthony book, but I still see Piers Morgan every time I see that name. And every time I see your answer, I'm like, Piers Morgan wrote a book about werewolves?
There's nobody named Piers except for Piers Morgan, as far as I know.
That's true. Yep.
All right. Pear Jane says Oz, of course. Scott knows, and I don't know what that means. Never was there a cooler, more laconic werewolf. He's a pocket hottie with a perfectly raised eyebrow and all the pathos of one who constantly fears the monster within himself. And no one but Seth Green could so perfectly court a girl with the line, I mock you with my monkey pants. Yep.
Man, Matt, it's just such a mysterious answer that you could know about if you chose to.
A whole bunch of words.
But you continue to choose not to. And so you have to be ignorant.
Yep. I'm kind of used to it at this point.
Like a Fox says, it's always felt to me that werewolves have gotten the short shrift in the quality department. Zombies are consistently popular. Vampires always get the prestige adaptations, but many werewolf movies are treated like they're only a proving ground for physical effects artists. However, there have actually been 2 recent werewolf movies that I think really hit the mark. The Cursed sees a rural English Victorian-era town plagued by a vengeful werewolf curse, and The Wolf of Snow Hollow is pretty much taking the movie Fargo and replacing the criminals with a werewolf. Both really feel like elevated genre work that stands head and shoulders above the glut of 4 out of 10 star movies polluting the Prime and Netflix search results.
Fargo with the criminals as a werewolf is the best movie pitch I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, I have not seen The Cursed, but I have actually seen The Wolf of Snow Hollow, and I agree with that assessment, and it's a really fun movie.
Okay, now I want to see that.
Mm-hmm.
Very fun. Okay, cool. I will watch that. Felidao says, the greatest werewolf story of all time is, of course, The Twilight Saga by Stephanie Meyer, aka the most sweeping and epic literary phenomenon of the 21st century. No doubt your entire audience has already read the entire series multiple times, but on the infinitesimal chance that there is someone uninitiated among us. The Twilight novels are about a young Native American werewolf named Jacob Black, who happens to fall in love with the human girl Bella Swan, who is somehow the most perfect girl to have ever lived. Everyone is inexplicably attracted to her, and although Stephanie Meyer never quite explains why, it doesn't matter. Literary genius needs no explanation. Anyway, moving on. Unfortunately for our werewolf protagonist Jacob, Bella has captured the attention of a creepy, manic, depressive, century-old vampire named Edward Cullen, who stalks Bella 24/7 and lurks outside her window to watch her sleep at night. The Twilight series details Jacob's heroic struggle to save Bella's immortal soul from Edward's tortured, smoldering gazes and deeply repressed sexuality. You guys should definitely cover these books on the podcast when season 2 of Kingslingers is done. Thank you for that totally serious and earnest answer, Fellow.
One cool thing about Fellow is that once a month they turn into a troll.
Oh, bad luck for us. No, that's fun. That's fun. I always forget that there's werewolves in those books.
Doesn't the werewolf like imprint Bella's daughter on him, and like so she's gonna be like obsessed? It's some weird shit happens in that book. I'm
so happy not to know.
I have not read it. I've just heard these things, just like you've heard about the clown book.
Yeah, no, I probably know a lot about the Twilights, but I don't know that piece of information.
Next, we have Financial Profit 584, who is a new listener, by the way. They said they just started listening a couple weeks ago. So hello and welcome to the party. They give this wonderful scene from Young Frankenstein. That here's me attempting to do comedy. Do you want to actually read this with me, Matt? How do we want to do this? Because if I just read it, it's not going to be funny.
I don't really remember how this goes, but what voice should I do?
I don't know. I mean, Inga is like has a terrible German accent, right?
I can do a terrible German accent.
Okay, you want to do Inga and Igor, and I'll do Dr. Frankenstein?
Sure. Here we go. I'm Inga first. Werewolf.
Werewolf?
There.
What?
There, wolf. There, castle.
Why are you talking that way?
I thought you wanted to.
No, I don't want to.
Suit yourself. I'm easy.
Thank you. Bravo. I have not read a ton of werewolf stories, but of course the Talisman is my favorite. Wolf is one of my favorite King characters, period. Also, Harry Potter is pretty good for werewolf stuff. I also think Cycle of the Werewolf and the Silmarillion, I always say that wrong, I don't know why, will be great stories when I finally read them. Also, the quote above shows Young Frankenstein's quip about werewolves is one of my favorites. God, I love Young Frankenstein. That's so good.
Yes. Good stuff. And
are there werewolves in the Silmarillion?
I mean, the closest thing I can think of Lord of the Rings adjacent would be like Bjorn, who is a man who turns into a bear, which is not a wolf.
Yeah.
But I don't know, there might be. I don't remember that. Next we have from Daniel D. My answer was going to be a Stephen King adaptation that I had no clue has anything to do with Cy King at the time. The Cycle of the Werewolf adaptation. Silver Bullet, with a pre-drug use Corey Haim and prime Gary Busey. I love the Harley Davidson wheelchair so much and probably had no business watching that flick as many times as I did that young, even though it was pretty spooky. I wore out my VHS tape. But then I remembered the other 1985 Puppers flick, Teen Wolf, and have to admit that it was my jam back in the day. It didn't go into much about the lore, but him dancing on the moving panel truck, bullying shopkeepers into giving him a keg regardless of age, and leading a spontaneous yet obviously choreographed dance number with the whole cast plus extras is all you really need to be able to do as a werewolf, so no need for mythology in that one. The whole hot blonde digging a beastie plot makes me laugh uncomfortably now, but I was too focused on crushing on her as a young lad to think of the weirdness of that whole plot point. That movie is an awesome slice of late 80s monster cinema. Honorable mention to Jack Nicholson's flick Wolf and the Fred the Vampire Accountant series by Drew Hayes. His take on were creatures is awesome, and them finding out one of their were-steed friends was actually a were-pony makes me burst out in laughter. Always recommend his stuff like Fred and Superpowereds, etc. for light, fun reads. Have a good rest of your week right here and now. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Can I admit to you that my whole life I thought a pony was just a baby horse, and then someone told me that a pony was actually a total different species of animal, and I was like, oh, I'm dumb.
It's okay, Scott. I think I was in my 20s when I learned this, which is still older than you would think that a person would learn that piece of information.
I feel like, I don't know, maybe someone's listening to this right now and just learned that. If you are, please let us know. But ponies, not horses.
I mean, it's one of those things that kind of doesn't make sense because you're like, why would there even be ponies? Like,
yeah, why is there just this mini horse?
Yeah.
What do you do with it other than have kids ride on it?
And it's distinctly not a horse though, right?
No.
So, but like that's what's weird though.
But it is, I mean, it's adjacent to a horse.
I mean, okay, this is an actual question. Like, is it not a horse in the same way that a donkey is not a horse? And if a donkey and a horse mate, then they create a sterile mule. Are there horse pony hybrids?
Are there horse pony hybrids? Ponies and horses can crossbreed, and they often do. Their offsprings are typically hardy and have exceptional temperaments, which makes them suitable for many equine activities.
What are they called?
That's a good question. It doesn't say.
Oh my God. They're called equid hybrids. That's stupid.
Boring. We need a cool name like Liger.
Or Zorse, which is a horse zebra. This is so disappointing. Get better names for your things, horse people.
But the name of a baby horse is a colt, by the way. In case you're wondering. In case you're like, well, then what's a baby horse?
Well, thank you, Scott.
It's a colt.
Thank you.
I liked Daniel's. We went on a tangent, but Jack Nicholson's Wolf. Did you watch that movie? I feel like I watched that movie when I was a kid, and it fucked me up. 1994, I was 9 years old, and that's a spooky one.
I haven't watched it, but I've seen clips, and I've seen that it's actually really violent and awful. So, and
it's got Michelle. It was part of my early love affair with Michelle Pfeiffer. The Batman Returns and Wolf combination just really was like, I love you, Michelle Pfeiffer, and I will love you forever.
Of course.
And so far, I am accurate in that statement.
Indeed.
Next, we have Jennifer D, who says, my favorite werewolf story is easy. My fave, and everyone else's, is Teen Wolf. If you give another answer, you're totally lying. Michael J. Fox, as the dorky, inept wannabe baller who never got the 80s hot chick, suddenly realizes he's a badass werewolf. He can rule the basketball court, get kegs of beer, and car surf in a handstand. He gets everything he thought he wanted, popularity, prowess, and the aforementioned 80s hot chick, only to realize that these things cost him his real friends. Cut to the end, in which he brushes aside his newfound glory to return to his old dorky self and rebuild his previous relationships. When he wins the big game as himself, not the wolf, then turns down the 80s hot chicks for the 80s girl next door. 80s girl next door chicks with the thing for dorks rejoice! Being a preteen was a hard time for me as a chubby bookworm, but this movie gave me hope. All 147,000 times I watched it.
That's great. This puts a more positive spin on Teen Wolf. Everyone else has been kind of mocking it, which is just so unfair.
It's a very fun movie. And the idea that someone said, like, okay, well, what does a wolf as a teenager do? Well, he'd probably be really good at basketball, right? And so he's just plays basketball. But my favorite thing about this movie is that Michael J. Fox's love interest, not the popular 80s chick, but the 80s girl next door, the character's name is Boof. Boof. Boof.
Of course.
Why not, right?
Yeah, well, they're the unattractive girl next door, who is, of course, I'm gonna just assume played by a beautiful actress.
Played by a woman named Susan Ursitti.
Okay.
Who she wasn't in a whole lot of stuff.
Well, good for her.
Yeah.
All right. Last answer from Steve L. I think the best werewolf stories are, number one, The Talisman. No other story makes you get the feels as much. It's just fantastic, as you know. Number two, Lupin in Harry Potter. Another gem of a story within a story. So good. And number three, Teenage Werewolf with Michael J. Fox. Good stuff and funny. Thank you, Steve L. Short and to the point. I love it.
Did you have any other ones that you didn't see here that you wanted to mention, Matt? Werewolf stories?
No. I think I mentioned mine last time, which was the Harry Potter Lupin thing, which I thought was a really great, really well executed story moment.
I will do a quick shout out to the werewolves in the What We Do in the Shadows movie and TV series. The werewolves in both of those are really, really wonderful and so funny. There was actually, I don't know if you remember this, but there was supposed to be a werewolf spinoff movie from that called werewolves, like as in We Are Wolves.
Uh-huh.
I think that got canceled. But there's a wonder the What We Do in the Shadows TV show on FX is fucking incredible. It's so good. Everyone should watch it.
Okay.
The other thing I wanted to shout out is a movie that just came out last year called Werewolves Within. It's actually based on a game, technically. It's based on a video game, like a small little independent video game where you're trapped in a house with a bunch of strangers and one of them is a werewolf and you have to figure out who it is. And it's a very, very good movie.
I think I've heard of that game. Yeah. Or I've maybe even played a version of it. That's cool. That sounds very fun.
It is. It's got Sam Richardson as the lead, who is one of my favorite comedy actors right now. He's fantastic. I don't know anything that you would have seen him in, Matt, but he's really good.
Awesome.
And that's it, right? That's all.
That's all the questions. That's all the answers.
Right.
I mean.
So moving on to next week's question, we talked a lot about bad dudes who use religion. So that's what our question is going to be this week. Who is your favorite actually evil religious figure? I guess you can get as cute with this as you want to. Matt and I were joking before we started recording about what some of your answers were going to be to this. But yeah, I mean, pick someone who is a bad dude but uses religion, or is a religious figure but is a bad dude.
Kind of feel like there's going to be a lot of Stephen King adjacent answers, actually.
I think you're probably right, because there's a lot of choices here for sure. All right, so that is going to do it for us this month. Week. Not month. I got werewolves on the brain, man. The months.
Yeah.
That's going to do it for us this week on Kingslingers. Next week, our time in Sunlight Home continues as we cover chapters 25 through 29 of this book. We are moving right along. It's flying by. I can't believe it. I think we only got 4 more episodes of this book or something like that.
Yeah, sounds about right. Remember, you can reach out to us via email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com or on Twitter at kingslingerspod, or head on over to the subreddit at r/doofmedia to hang out or answer the discussion question.
And make sure you are subscribed to Kingslingers so you never miss an episode. We actually got, lately we've been getting a lot of emails and questions from people where episodes are not showing up places or being delayed places. And I just wanted to put out a blanket statement that, first of all, sorry about that. And second of all, we have no control over that, unfortunately. We put our episodes up on our RSS feed, and every single one of these systems is supposed to see that feed, grab that information, and then display the episode for you. And sometimes they don't.
Yeah. Some of them are notoriously not good at doing that basic task.
Yeah. Stitcher sucks. Stitcher is always 12 to 24 hours behind every other one, and I don't know why.
Yeah. Yep. So, harass them, please.
Yeah. Once again, sorry. I wish there was something we could do to make that process easier for you, but it's just a crapshoot.
Yep. And if you like the Kingslingers and you want to support us, then please consider donating to our Patreon account at patreon.com/doofmedia. This week, special thanks to new patrons Sid B and the Hobo Demon. Welcome. We hope you enjoy the cool stuff we have over on the Patreon. Scott and I just recorded a bonus podcast discussing the film 1408, the adaptation of Stephen King's short story. And that's going to be some bonus content that drops later this week. So that's the sort of thing that you get access to when you support us on Patreon.
Yeah, and Matt says later this week because we are recording this particular episode on a Monday evening. But for you folks in the future, it will have come out yesterday. So,
yes, you're right.
This is a great time for you to join because I think that's a really great conversation. So you'll get that and like 13 other Levels of the Tower episodes where we talk about King adaptations, plus a whole suite of bonus content from our partners and Matt and his brother's show. There's a ton of bonus content there, and it's all really good. We think you'll really enjoy it. And so please support us.
Yeah.
But if you can't do that, that's okay. You can instead help us out by leaving us rating and reviews everywhere. Leave us multiple. I don't know if that works, but can you leave us 17 reviews?
19.
Do it.
19 reviews.
Dude, yeah, sorry. Yeah, of course. 19. Jesus, Scott, come on. Suddenly Matt is a better constant reader than I am. When did this happen?
I've been training.
This week's Spotlight review comes from Apathetic Activist, who gives us 5 stars and says, hooked through the bag. I didn't find this podcast until you guys had already finished the Dark Tower series. To be honest, you guys were halfway through Insomnia before I listened to the first intro, but after fully committing and ignoring my work and family, I finally caught up. What a ride. This isn't my first trip to the tower, but it was my favorite so far. These two fellows really know how to read a book and break it down so it's easily digested. This is a masterclass in book discussion. I liked it so much I became a total podcast convert, and I've started listening to all the content I can get my ears on. Thanks for being awesome. My kids miss me.
Well, that's great. That's great, Apathetic Activist. Remember, your kids will always be there, but podcasts are fleeting.
That's true. That is definitely true. This whole thing is going to collapse any minute now. Listen as much as you can. But seriously, thank you for those kind words. I mean, a masterclass in book discussion, that means the world to me that you said that. So
thank you.
And that's going to do it for us this week. Hope you folks enjoyed the episode. We will see you back here next week as we continue the Talisman. Long days and pleasant nights.
And you have twice the number.